Lunchtime-Tangle friends. I hope you're well today and that you have your pangea-pepper blossoms in front of you and ready to color. I usually introduce myself as Annie-Reiser, certified Zen-tangle teacher and certified botanical illustrator. And the reason for that is I was a botanical illustrator long before I did Zen-tangle. But today also that matters because I'm going to be showing you an age-old technique that I learned as a classically trained botanical illustrator. And I'm talking like from the Renaissance and before. Today I'm going to show you just a hint of what you can do to make your piece a little bit more realistic, a little bit more interesting with color layering and a technique called Grisaille. I would like to show you first a few of my pieces just to give you an idea exactly what that means and how we're going to kind of alter that so it's a bit easier for us as tanglers to incorporate into our practice. Here you see my lilies of the valley in progress and how I am layering colors on top of the grisaille that was established with actually colored pencil, not with graphite like we will be doing today. That's one of the simplified aspects that I'm telling you about. Here you can clearly see that I am doing my grisaille with a French gray or a cool gray here, I'm not sure. And then I layered on top of that the greens or the yellows and the blues to create the greens to give that dimension. Here again, I was using a French gray as a grisaille, but we are never allowed to use a smudge stick in botanical illustration. Rather, our underpainting or our grisaille is done entirely with the finessing of our pencil strokes. And that takes years to really master, and also it takes years to get the balance of your underpainting versus your color on top so that the piece looks totally incorporated and not muddied. And so please beware that, you know, it does take a little bit of practice to do this, what we're doing today, even though it's simplified quite a bit. And I hope you get enticed enough to keep trying it out. So let's go for it. Let's just go for it. So we left off at this point with our little project last time. These are my pangea-pepper blooms, and I have given them my grisaille, my underpainting, with my soft graphite pencil like we did together. And I am going to now layer on top some colors to make this look rich and more realistic than if you just take a pencil out of your box that's poppy red and paint over the top. I mean, already we would have the advantage of having two layers because we've got our grisaille already. Now our grisaille is what is going to be giving us the form. It's going to show us some dimension in our flower that you could not get otherwise unless you did things a little differently. There are many different ways to do this, and one is with watercolor pencils, or colored pencils. And today I'm going to show you the technique with colored pencils and burnishing them. So we've got our grisaille, and since this is graphite, I want to make sure that our graphite is not going to come up too muddy. So I am going to make sure that I lift with my kneaded eraser ever so slightly so that I have the right balance between the graphite. You do want to still see the form, but you don't want it to be so dark that it's going to be muddying. Now, I will say that the graphite looks a lot like, it gives this kind of a vintage look because of that sort of muddied undercoat, and I love it. I think it looks really, really cool. And you're still going to see a little bit of that, you know, darkness of the pencil, but that's okay. That's what's giving us this illusion of this center really dipping down, right? So we're going to layer. I've already worked up all of the colors for you. That's what's usually done with swatching. And yes, you could go to your pencil box and grab poppy red from Prismacolor and just color over the top. But you'll get a much richer look if you start with lighter colors. And in this case, I'm going with an undercoat or a first coat of a warm yellow, like a cadmium yellow. A dark chrome yellow actually is this color from Faber Castell. And then I'm going to progress up to Scarlet Lake Red and then go to a deep scarlet red to give it that, really deep, dark depth. So let's go. I'm going to just lightly, with a bit of a circular motion, I'm going to lightly add my deep chrome, dark chrome yellow. Since we are layering several colors, you want to start out with a light touch before you get to burnishing. And you don't want to burnish. We'll talk about what that is in a bit. But you don't want to burnish until you get so far that you're not going to be adding any more color. You do want to try to saturate this tooth, and the best way to do that is with a sharp tip. So I always have my pencil sharpener nearby. Now I'm going to layer the next color on top of that. And this is the progressively darker one called Scarlet Red, Faber Castell. And I will have all of these listed in the descriptions. Now, when you see me getting closer, when you see me covering this, you can let a little bit of that under yellow shine through. It will burnish down some, but I think that's the beauty, to let some of that other color that you just applied shine through. And then when you get to, do you see how the graphite is sort of acting like a roadmap for us? We're going to apply a little more pressure in those darker grisaille areas so that it's going to really cover with these darker colors and not show as gray, but rather as a darker color of the color on top. Since this is such a small area, I'm not really doing this stroke, but rather more the small elliptical circular stroke. But your stroke is a personal thing. You want to work on what feels really comfortable for you. You just don't want to scrub back and forth. You want it to be a light, very densely spaced stroke. Now this paper is not a watercolor paper, which I would prefer a 140-pound hot press watercolor paper. This is a Zendala, and it's actually a printmaking paper, so it's very absorbent. It will take a lot of beating, so it's actually kind of good for beginners in the color layering process to work on because it will take a lot of beating. So now I'm going to progress to my next color, which is the Scarlet Red, deep Scarlet Red. So I am really now trying to concentrate on covering up that gray area with this deepest red. One thing is, if you layer your colored pencils up too much and push too hard and get the layers very heavy, you get what's called wax bloom, and that's not attractive. You don't want your colored pencils to have this shiny surface. So we can, at this point, burnish. And burnishing is, my students ask all the time, how do I make the pencil strokes disappear? Their tendency is to want to then press harder with the pencil, and that's not what you want to do. But you can make those pencil strokes disappear by something called burnishing. And there's different ways to burnish. You can burnish with a colorless pencil blender. And I don't even have that one right here in front of me. But it's just called a colorless blender. It's basically a colored pencil with no pigment in it. And you can blend and smash down those colors. Basically, we're mixing the colors right on our piece. or you can use a lighter color. Now, when I am layering, I often will go back with my lighter color anyway to add some more highlights in there just to make sure that they're really showing up. But you see, by pressing harder on the lighter color, you can actually blend these other pigments together into the tooth of the paper to make that pencil stroke disappear. Sometimes you can use white, but white will cause a tint in the color, and that might not be what you want. A nice lemon yellow could work really well here because it would just kind of really brighten the piece. But you see how that is now basically burnished down. But my favorite way to burnish, first I'm going to put equal amounts of light back on here. I often switch out back and forth between all the colors I'm using until I get just the right amount of the colors that I want. For example, here I think it could use a little bit more of the darkest red. Being careful not to press too hard and get that sheen going. But now watch what's going to happen. I'm going to use my Prismacolor solvent blender. And I did hear that they're going to discontinue these, so I just bought a few. You can also use the Copic brand, which is just as nice, just as wonderful. And I like this one just because it has two different tips that are nice. That's the very fine tip, and then here's the larger tip for blending larger areas. When you use a colorless blender like this, you'll have to have a piece of scratch paper nearby to always, in between, always clean the tip. You don't want any contamination of other colors from your blender. So I am going to show you this magic. Watch. So basically, look how this just melts those pigments together and really activates almost like water in a watercolor pencil wash. But you have to be extremely careful not to belabor the paper surface. You don't want it to get smashed down and liquefy the paper. You don't want to pull out any of your pen marks, even though they're supposed to be permanent. The Sakuras are not always permanent. So I am just what I call hitting it up. I'm hitting it up and not staying a long time on the surface of the paper. Also, if you live in a climate that's very humid, it doesn't dry as quickly as, for example, here in Colorado. So just barely hitting it up. And do you see how those pencil strokes totally disappear because we're pretty much painting this pigment into the tooth of the paper? And the beautiful thing about using a solvent blender is if you let it dry plenty, you can go back over it with a couple more layers without it getting that horrible waxy bloom and that sheen that we're trying to avoid with our layering. So I'm going to let that dry because I might go back on it with a little bit of pencil, but I'm going to go for my next one just to show you again, and then we can talk about the green leaves. So part of color layering is swatching your color, and you do that by figuring out what your final color is going to be, and how would you arrive at that color by mixing the colors that you have. For example, if I wanted just a plain spring green, you saw in my little Grisaille slide that of the lilies of the valley, I didn't just pick up the plain green. I started with a yellow undercoat, and I always start with a yellow glaze when I'm doing greens. And then I actually built my green by using the correct hue of blue. Yellow and blue make green, right? So I was building my green rather than just taking the boring green out of the box. So that's how you get to that beautiful, rich look. And we can do the same thing here. And I like to say, all you have to do is go to your box. You don't have to have these same colors as me. You just need 3 colors or even 2 that go progressively darker, that maybe are in the same color family or analogous colors, tone and tone. And that way you can be sure that you're not going to get mud. I mean, there is a lot of color theory involved in swatching and understanding what colors not to put together. Like, you don't want to put purple and yellow together because it will create brown. So you have to know a little bit of color theory. But even if you don't know color theory, you can get to this look by just grabbing hold of the pencils that are in the same color family in your hand and just working progressively darker or lighter. Sometimes we do go lighter with your layering. And the more you do it, you start understanding the colors and which go really well together and which we absolutely cannot put together. So yeah, this is a very, very simplified explanation of something that took me years to learn and really understand. But I think by just doing a little bit at a time, even just 2 or 3 colors over a grisaille, you've already got the layering going. So I need a little bit more yellow, and you don't have to make each bloom exactly the same. You can have one that's a little bit more lighter color or vibrant in its yellows. You can make one that's quite a bit more saturated in the reds. Now it's time for my blender. Again, getting my piece of paper out, just barely touching the surface, getting those pigments just to melt together. Notice how I'm going from the light up to the dark. If you go from the dark down to the light, you risk pulling more dark color into the light where you may not want it. So, or you may want it. Just depends on your situation. I do like to find a rhythm in my color layering. That is, I do prefer to do all one color first, because then I have about the same amount of pressure on my stroke. I also remember the order better. Part of swatching is writing down the exact order with the exact color pencil that you're layering, so that you can retain that color again in the future if you need it. I work for a seed packet company that I do illustrations for, and if they like one certain color and I can't get that color again, I'm in trouble. So I have to make meticulous notes at how I arrived at a particular color. I even include my grisaille, like if I'm using a French gray, I'll put the percentage down, or if I'm using a cool gray or a warm gray. And I think, as you saw in my grisaille demonstration for the botanicals, my last one was a poppy. And the poppies, I actually used a darker red as my underpainting or my grisaille. So it doesn't have to always be gray tones. It can be a complementary color even. If you're doing a yellow flower, for example, a really good grisaille could be a grayed lavender, because lavender and yellow are going to make a darker color, right? Like almost a brown. And that's what we want. We want that grisaille to still show up as your form when it's covered with the colors. And now I'm on to my second darkest color. Remember to kind of really cover up that gray tone with these darker colors. So if you like this technique and you want to practice it again, I did another little YouTube with a mini color layering lesson. It was with our moonberries. We tried to make them look like blueberries, and we used the same concept. Remember to keep a pretty light touch, except for when you're on the gray tones. You can add a little bit more pressure just to get them really covered, but you don't want to be pressing too hard. This is all really and truly just a matter of practicing. The more you do it, the faster you realize what works. Okay, even though it looks sharp to you, my pencil is not sharp enough. You can really tell when you see that it's not going down into the tooth of the paper anymore. That's when you need to sharpen. I told you I let this one dry. I'm going ahead and adding even a little bit more of this darkest scarlet, deep scarlet. So just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and burnish down this one over here. It's on the side and it could be getting some light. So we might want to keep some of those on the side here a little bit lighter. One thing Zen-Tangle has done for me has spoiled me with regards to being able to turn my tile to work more easily. If this were a botanical illustration, we have them taped down and we have a little veil of trace over the top to keep it from smearing and when we put it away, and you can't just easily turn to keep that comfort for your hand. So I have become very spoiled with that, and I miss it a lot when I'm doing an 11 by 17 inch piece that I can't just manipulate. All right, let's build again. So I'm not done here with my darkest red. So at this point, you can easily see which of the blooms has been burnished. All of these, right? They're almost looking like a watercolor. And that's the look you want. You want it to look like it's been a watercolor wash. Whereas these, you can really still see the pencil marks, right? So I'm kissing the paper, cleaning the tip, going from light to dark unless I want to pull more darks out. Some more, and then I think I'm going to go back over a few of them with my yellows. So don't let your piece intimidate you. You are the creator here, and you can do it just how you want it. Don't be afraid to go back over and add more color, more yellow, more red, to get it just how you want it. Be careful of that balance of not getting too much of the pigment on to make it shiny. It's a little blotchy there, so I just added a little more to really give a smooth transition. Then I can hit it up again with my blender. And it's just kind of illuminating in front of my eyes. This one definitely needs more yellows, to brighten that up. You know, this isn't as quick as our regular Zentangling, but it's very satisfying. And honestly, color layering for me is every bit as zen as doing the pen work. I love, love, love to shade. I love to color. Just give me a blank contour and I will shade it up for you all day long. That's what I could do forever. So enjoy. Just like we do in Zen-Tangle, enjoy this process. Take your time because good things come if you take your time, right? Now we are ready to color the leaf here, or Samson leaf, and I'm looking at it right now, and you know me and shading, I love my dark darks and light lights, but on this I'm going to have to lift some of my shading because it will interfere with the colors when I layer over the top. So I don't want it so dark. That's the balance that's always a little bit hard to find. Now to do my leaf, I've chosen to take a lemon yellow or a yellow glaze from Prismacolor. Then my next color is going to be permanent green. It is Faber Castell. And then my final, to give some extra dark darks, is going to be my pine green, also from Faber Castell. So actually, let's stay with Faber Castell, so it's easier for you. Here's the lemon yellow glaze, or the light yellow glaze, the permanent green, and the pine green. But if you just choose something out of your box that's similar, that will work, I promise. We just want a lemon yellow for our first glaze. And again, I'm doing it very lightly, and also I am doing my circular motion to get down into the tooth of the paper. This was kind of tricky. I drew behind, and so some of this area is going to be the leaf. Let's see if it works. Okay, second layer done, because the first layer is our grisaille, our shading, right? Second layer, so here's our third layer coming with my permanent green. I like to kind of save out the tips a little bit. I think it makes them look a little more believable, like the light is shining on them. So just keep working your colors back and forth. That is not sharp. Always a light touch, but a little bit more pressure right there on the grays. See how this is already almost burnishing down enough with the yellow. But I'm going to add another layer near these mid ribs, and again where there was that gray. And this is not sharp. Oh, let's see, I forgot this part down here. I don't want the dark to bleed out too dark when I hit it up with my blender. So I'm putting another layer of lemon yellow glaze, or the yellow glaze. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my paper ready. Trying to stay away from too much of the ink. I think that's good enough. And how pretty is that already? Now I am going to probably go off camera and do a few things to this. I'm probably going to do a little gold rim around here, and maybe add some tangles on the rim here. I have to decide what I want compositionally. I haven't quite done that. But look how beautiful the coverage of these colors is, and how much more interesting it is than just a flat color. You can stop your layering. You can keep going. Like here, I kind of stopped just to show you that, the more layers you add on top with the darker color, as you get progressively darker, the more contrast in the colors you're going to have. So just wanted to show you, here is a sample of me stopping the color layering here. I could get to this color again if I added more of the darker, the darkest of my darks, right? So that is how you achieve beautiful color with Grisaille. I hope you love this and continue to post your wonderful results to my student Facebook page. Check out Moonberry. I will have it in the description. That's another mini color layering lesson. And have fun with our pangea-pepper poppies, actually. So thanks again for joining me. I am going to make an announcement. I am going to be on a little vacation, my very first since before COVID. Going to visit my dear friend in Florida. I'll be riding horses and swimming at the beach and lounging at her pool and hot tub and grooming the horses and just getting all of that wonderful moisture and humidity that we lack here in Colorado. So I will be off for a couple weeks, but I hope and know I will be very inspired by all the beautiful tropical blossoms and growth that they have there. So look for something especially tropical from me next time. That's it for today's Tangle. Thanks for joining me. If you like these lunchtime tutorials, please give them a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I also invite you to check out my website for classes that I have scheduled or to purchase my Tangle tags for your favorite step outs. That's botangle.net. I'm leaving you with some other links too. Zentangle.com, where you can learn more about the Zentangle method from its founders, Rick Roberts and Maria Thomas. You can also visit their store there for a multitude of Zentangle paper tiles, tools, books, and kits. Tanglepatterns.com is that site I talk about where you can explore hundreds of tangle patterns, read about them, and get the step out, which is basically the deconstruction of the pattern. And finally, if you'd like to share your beautiful results with me and my student community, please join Annie's Botangle Alumni Facebook page. We're a private group where we inspire each other with our work and offer tips and useful information about art and Zentangle.